Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. It's nice to see you here, and may God bless you. You know, when you read the newspapers, you hear the news, I like to be informed. I like to know what's happening in this world. I really find it important. I find it helps me to focus where I am, where we are in time, which is a very important thing. So the end is near. I do believe we sometimes look at the wrong things. What we look at, what people out there are looking at, is basically the answer to this question. How will the world end? Well, we have a few options, of course. The world may well end because of war. We certainly have that capacity. And of course, is the other question of the $64,000 question is, and when? How long do we have to go? No matter what perspective you look at it, this planet, it would appear, has a used-by date. Even on a climatic condition alone, on the human genome alone, we have a used-by date. No question about it. Like I said, we are ever so clever with war, and we do a lot of it around the globe. And we certainly have built up an enormous capacity where we can destroy. I don't know why. We build and we destroy. We build, rebuild, and destroy, and then destroy it again. Somehow, the madness of warfare, the absolute madness of warfare. Look at these people. Why? What motivates them? What on earth? They're not certainly worshipping the same God that I know, that's for certain. They are certainly not following him. And this is their ambition, and this is what they want. And unless you agree, you, of course, only meet certain fate. It's interesting when you look at wars, terrorists or otherwise. If you add up all the cost of warfare, if we could only use that money for the good of mankind, there'd be no hunger. There would be education for everybody. But we somehow don't quite get it. There in the 21st century, we are more at it than anything else. It's ridiculous. Of course, I know there may not be simple answers, but somewhere along the line, we are very self-destructive. And then Jesus mentioned that just before his coming, there would be an increase in pestilences. And you look at a matter like Ebola, which could well be our problem tomorrow. It's only a plane flight away. And this is a tremendous issue. In a world where we have tremendous uncertainties, there's no question about it. Let's turn to the book of Revelation. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the book of Revelation. It was written under inspiration, of course, by the youngest disciple that Jesus had, and his name was John. And he became the one, by this time when he wrote the book of Revelation, which he could place in 95, 96 AD, he is the only surviving apostle, you understand. The rest have all been martyred. He escaped a martyrdom that whilst they were trying to boil him in oil as a punishment, his testimony was so impressive that his executioners, at the risk of their own life, let him go. Quite remarkable. And he died of old age. Joachim in the Hebrew, he is a fantastic author. You know, of course, the book of the Gospel of John, the letters of John, and the book here of Revelation. It really is the revelation of Jesus Christ, not St. John the Divine. Now, he wrote this, and we come to a particular chapter which deals, and it's the 6th chapter, which deals with the 7 seals. If you hear a bit of thunder, I've hired an earth-gripping movement to give a bit of a stake to make sure everybody stays awake and nobody falls asleep. And I'm going to talk about an earthquake, and I want it to be real. So I want you to listen, because they cost a lot per hour. The 7 seals, the 7 seals. There was a problem when he looked in vision, and he looked there in heaven, and he saw the God of heaven, God the Father, and on the side and near the side of the Father was a scroll with 7 seals, and there was an issue about that scroll, and the issue about that scroll was, who is worthy to open the seals of this scroll? And that was the question. And it appeared there was no one there. And John, in his vision, gets so emotionally involved with this, he cries. And there's an angelic being that comes to him, or at least a heavenly being, and he says to him, don't cry, we actually have someone who is worthy. He said, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals. This is the history of planet Earth. That is why there was such an issue. It is the history of this planet, particularly pertaining to the Christian church, from the church perspective, from God's heaven's perspective, right till the second coming. And the book of Revelation, I hope on Wednesday nights, if you're not coming on Wednesday night, you must have something extremely important. Extremely important, because I have difficulty in understanding that here we are, we all want to go on. We all want to make it into the kingdom of God. We all want to have eternal life. I haven't met anybody yet that says, I'm looking forward to go to hell. I really do. I really do. Nobody tells you that. So we want to be saved. It's good to know how God saves you. You might just help it along a little bit by doing the right thing, if you know what I mean. It is so important. So we're going to talk particularly this coming Wednesday. We're going to talk about some prophecies there that actually span 2,300 years, and you ought to know this prophecy because it's coming right into our own time. Now, the 7 seals, who is worthy to open? We have the answer to that. And then you have, and you might have heard of this, of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are actually the first 4 seals. And that really deals with the history, as all of this does, of the Christian church. And it's interesting what he sees in vision. He sees, of course, the apostolic church, then he sees it being followed by the pagan Roman persecution, and then, of course, he will see the compromising church once Christianity becomes legal, and then he sees the medieval church that so brutally imposed upon people what it wanted to believe. And then we come to what is called the 5th seal, and he sees a vision, he sees an altar. And the altar is not an altar of incense, it's an altar of sacrifice. So it is really an earthly view. And he sees the souls of those who have been beheaded. Now, you can't see the souls, you can only see the body, you understand. A soul in the Bible is the body and the spirit of life. That's just the way it is. There's no defense here of bodiless entities living there in heaven. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, this is a earthly scene because the altar here is the altar of sacrifice which was on this planet, signifying, of course, the sacrifice itself. And then there's a very interesting element here that is introduced. In the 5th seal, you look at the time of the Great Tribulation, which lasted from 538 to 1798 AD. If you would have been here on Wednesdays, you would have understood immediately what that says. It's the 1260-year supremacy of a medieval church. And there was, of course, tremendous persecutions there, and they were a bit cut short by some 25 years. In the early 70s, it actually finished. But we have the cry of the martyrs, and it pertains to the persecutions that sort of finished round about that time. That is the record. It stopped. Now, they have a question, and the question that they asked was, how long before you avenge? The question is to God. And they're told to be patient. They were given a robe of righteousness, which means there will be a judgment and they will be judged worthy. And then, but there was still a number to be completed. In other words, there was still some going on of persecutions. The timing in the book of Revelation, folks, is absolutely impeccable. The details are fantastic. People say, how come you believe what you believe? I believe what I believe because I am a skeptic. I must have the evidence. Why should I not insist on that? And it's there. Don't you believe by faith? Yes, I do. I have faith in God because He's given me so many reasons to have faith in Him. It's almost embarrassing. It's crazy that people don't believe in the God of the Bible. Have a look at this sermon here. I think it will help you. The sixth seal that succeeds, of course, and the fifth one deals with some cosmic disturbances, which I think are so important. We look ahead on today, and we look ahead on how and when this planet may finish. Well, the manner in which this planet is going to finish, as we all know as we are sitting here, is simply by the second coming of Jesus. That is the end of the world as we know it. It's what the Bible teaches. Correct? Good. It's a good effect, isn't it? I want you to know it's not cheap. Now, let's start with some of them. What we're going to look at is a meteoritic shower that was so fantastic there in 1833, and I'll give you all the details. That still unexplained phenomenon of the dark day all over the continent of the Americas, and succeeded by the sun that became like red as blood. Of course, all preceded with the biggest earthquakes on record. I want you to know we're going to look at four things. We are going to look at an earthquake which was the biggest in history. We are going to look at the darkening of the sun. When the sun should have given light, it was dark. It was not an eclipse, by the way, and I'll talk more about it. The moon was blood red. Very rare would you see this phenomenon. The stars fall from heaven. Now, of course, these are not really stars because that would be the end of this planet. It clearly are meteorites. We talk about a falling star, don't we? That's a meteorite. You understand that? That burns up in the atmosphere. Okay. They must occur in this order. Now, I want you to really carefully listen here. The earthquake must come first. The darkening of the sun has to follow. The redness, the moon not giving its light must follow that phenomenon. And then ultimately the stars must fall from heaven. These must occur in that correct order. And they have a meaning. And there's a purpose for the Bible to record these events. And these events, I'm going to put it to you, are of course already in the past. What I'm trying to tell you here this morning, sometimes it's good to look at history that we have so easily forgotten. When you look at the history, it tells you when He's coming. And so, let's start with that. The first ones, most certainly, must begin in the last part of the Great Tribulation. They were told in the fifth seal to wait because there was still some tribulation coming. And then we have the sixth seal, so there is still some continuance of the tribulation. The persecutions that under the Inquisitions found place. God's people were being persecuted. And so we're going to have a start with the earthquake. And the earthquake that we will start with is the biggest one on record, it's called the earthquake of Lisbon. But it was I have some information here that makes it such an event. There was no Richter scale, so it's very hard to give you a measurement. But it is absolutely incredible. Some of the information will stun you, really. When that happened, the tidal waves, what it did to the maritime existence of all the boats, was absolutely incredible. A tidal wave that has rarely been witnessed. But the city of Lisbon was so destroyed, it was only, of course, recorded in sketches, and you can find them on the internet. You can see the swaying of the buildings, you can see the water that came into that massive city, and you can see what happens to the people. And also, at the same time, there was a fire that broke out that was very responsible for the destruction of this city. Though commonly known as the earthquake of Lisbon, it extended to the greater part of Europe, Africa and America. That's incredible. It was felt in the West Indies. We're talking about southern Europe. It was felt in the West Indies. It was as severe on the north coast of Africa as if the epicenter was actually there. It wasn't, it was around Lisbon. By the way, this is the place where they had the Inquisition. You had two Inquisitions, the Spanish And of course the Portuguese Inquisitions. And it's not by coincidence that that this would have happened there, I am convinced. It was felt in Greenland, in the West Indies, in the island of Madeira, Norway, Sweden, so Scandinavia felt it, Great Britain and Ireland. It pervaded an extent of not less than 4 million square miles. The records are there. The records are there. It's very well documented. On the SBS, they, a couple of years, had a magnificent program on it. In Africa, the shock was almost as severe as in Europe. A great part of Algiers, you know, that's northern Africa. Algiers was destroyed, and a short distance from Morocco, which is joining Algiers, a village containing 8,000 to 10,000 inhabitants was just simply swallowed up by a splitting earth. Amazing, isn't it? These are phenomena we forget, but they happened. A fast wave, tidal wave, swept over the coast of Spain and Africa, engulfing cities, causing great destruction. It was in Spain and Portugal that the shock manifested its most extreme violence. And I have no doubt in my mind that these places that are the origin of the Inquisitions were held to ransom by a god. I have no doubt about it. Let's read on. The actual date is the 1st of November, 1755. It started 9 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning it started. The Great Tribulation was still ongoing, the persecutions. It still had a few more years to go. At Cadiz, the inflowing wave was said to be 60 feet high. Imagine facing a tidal wave 60 feet high. That's 20 meters. They're coming to you unstoppable, with a whole of an ocean behind it. Can you imagine the destruction? This is second to none. Mountains, some of the largest in Portugal, were impetuously shaken, as it were, from their very foundations, and some of them opened their summits, which were split and rent in a wonderful manner. Huge masses of them were being thrown down the adjacent valleys. And this is all recorded by Sir Charles Lyell when he, in his book, The Principle of the Geology, page 495. Flames are related to have issued from these mountains. The lava, the burning was obviously getting in contact with the water. You can only imagine the cataclysm that actually occurred. At Lisbon, a sound of thunder was heard underground, and immediately afterwards, violent shocks threw them down the greater part of that city. This is incredible. In the course of about 6 minutes, only 6 minutes, 60,000 people died, perished. What a catastrophe this was. On the end of the day, you had 90,000 people who had died. The sea at first retired, lay bare to dry, then rolled in, rising 50 feet or more above its ordinary level, and it was so destructive. Among other extraordinary events related to have occurred of Lisbon during the catastrophe was the subsidence of a new quay. They built a new quay, massive, quite large. And they spared no expense. It was the most solid of its kind, and it was all covered with marble. It was an absolute delight to walk there, a most magnificent promenade, built entirely of marble at an immense expense. A great concourse of people, when the shaking started, had collected there, thousands of them. They went there for safety as a spot where they might be beyond the reach of the falling ruins, but suddenly the whole quay sank down with all the people in it, and not one of those thousands of bodies ever made it to the surface. What an event. Now, if that happened today, you would be aware of it. You have 90,000 people that in that area alone perished. What is fascinating is this: if you put that in terms of today's population, the population then, at the late 1800s, would have been no more than 500 million people, if that. We have more than 10 times the population now. It's quite incredible. That is a massive amount of people to suddenly lose. The shock of the earthquake was instantly followed by the fall of every church and convent, almost all the large public buildings, and more than 1/4 of the houses. And look at this is ironic. In about 2 hours and after the shock, fires broke out in different quarters, raged with such violence for the space of nearly 3 days that the city was completely destroyed. The earthquake happened on a religious holiday, I think it was All Saints' Day. When the church and convents were full of people, very few of them escaped, because so many of them were in church, and those who were not, when it all started, they ran to the churches for protection. They were clinging to the statues. Unfortunately, many ran to the churches for protection, but in vain was the sacrament exposed. In vain did the poor creatures embrace the altars. Images, priests, and people were buried in one common ruin. It has been estimated that 90,000 persons lost their life on that fateful day. What an event. How many of you were really aware of the earthquake of Lisbon? The Bible talks about it. I'm going to show you a little bit more here. This is amazing. It pays to read your Bible and then take it to known history. And there's so much that will be unraveled. John the Revelator saw this in vision, and you wonder what that must have been like when he saw that. He looked, he said, and when he opened, Jesus opened the sixth seal, behold, there was a great earthquake, which is the Lisbon earthquake, which was still happening when the tribulation was going on. The persecutions were still happening, and the executions. Now, what followed, as we know, number 2, really should be the dark day. Such an event occurred in history as yet till today, totally unexplained. It was not, I repeat, it was not an eclipse. We had full moon that day, pretty well. The dark day, so well recorded in newspapers and still held, of course, by the libraries of that particular country, the Americas. On May 19, 1780, a dark day occurred. The sun came up as any other day. As it came up, there was an eerie glow that was almost metallic. An eerie glow which really turned into darkness. By 11 o'clock in the morning, it was pitch dark. It was daytime, but pitch dark. The animals responded by going back to sleep. But the people, of course, were so disturbed. This occurred over the whole, again, of the Americas, which is not coincidental either. Once we go more into Revelation, provided you come and attend, you will learn the significance of America in prophetic history at the closing scenes of this planet. You should be here to learn about this. And so on this particular dark day, when schools were dismissing the pupils, the children were scared, people thought it was the end of the world. That's what they thought it was. Many conversions in that day, and this was a frightful experience, so well recorded, almost, if not altogether alone, as the most mysterious and as yet unexplained phenomenon of its kind stands the dark day of May the 19th, 1780. And it says a most unaccountable darkening of the whole visible heavens and atmosphere in New England, which of course is, then it was still a colony more or less, or known as New England. Of course, this is a historian, and he notes this event, and everybody still today recognizes the fact that it cannot and never has been explained by science. Interesting, the second thing. The third phenomenon, of course, was the interesting part of the moon. It was a full moon. The first half part of the night, right till 12 o'clock, you couldn't see the moon. When it became visible, it was blood red. And that, again, is very unexplainable. Jesus, in Matthew 24, and also, of course, in the Gospel of Luke as recorded, talked about the coming of the Son of Man, the second coming. This is what he said. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. You see, Jesus didn't start with the earthquake. Why didn't he start with the earthquake? During the earthquake, you still had the great tribulation. Are you following me? The details are important. So the details says that during the Lisbon earthquake, clearly there was still persecution. Jesus, in his foreknowledge, said so. He said immediately after the tribulation, which finished in the 1770s, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. That's what he said. And the other thing that he noticed was concerning the moon. Whilst he didn't indicate the color of the moon, he very clearly said that the moon will not give its light. For 3 consecutive nights, the following day, it was a perfectly ordinary day, daytime. Nighttime, for another 2 nights after the first, there was the blood redness of the moon, and it barely gave its light. And that is what occurred there in 1780, in May. John the Revelator, year 95 AD, records this: the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. And some of the people that watched the phenomenon before it became too dark described exactly that is the way the sun looked. And the moon became like blood. I told you the second part of the night, after midnight, it was the blood redness of the moon that was so extraordinarily significant. There's another prophet by the name of Joel. You're looking at the 7th century BC. The sun shall be turned into darkness, he said, and the moon into blood. This is in the context of right at the end time. Significant, isn't it? All these prophecies are pointing towards one thing: the coming of Jesus. It's given there to us in the correct order. When we look at this one, this is really, really good. The falling of the stars. As I said, they have to be meteorized, and of course they were, from the night from the 12th to the 13th of November, starting at about 2 o'clock in the morning, for a consecutive 4 hours at least. There was this meteoric shower that has second to none, where per estimation some 200,000 meteorites were passing through the heavens per hour. This was it brought people outside. People somehow woke up, because even though there was no noise, people were crying out who saw it. People came out of their houses. People were kneeling in the streets, and there wasn't an atheist alive in the whole of the Americas. They had never seen anything like this. They had never seen anything like this. It found place in 1833, and that is significant because there was a message about the second coming. These people were Advent people, not 7 days Adventists. These were people from different denominations who were telling the world, trying to teach everybody that Jesus was coming back. Jesus was coming back, and he was coming back soon. In fact, they had picked a date, 1844. So 11 more years to go when this shower found place. Man, that the people flocked to their movement, because this certainly was one of the clearest signs of the imminent coming of Jesus. Sometimes you wish you had that sort of facility and power, a bit of harmless, it would be it'd be helpful. It would fill the room, it would. No? Yeah. I think it would. But it goes to show how quickly people forget. That is what occurred from 2 o'clock until broad daylight, the sky being perfectly serene and cloudless. An incessant play of dazzling, brilliant luminosities was kept up in the whole of the heavens. There has never been a sight like that before that. There has never been a sight like that since. Massive. The description of one of the papers, like a fig tree shedding its figs, In fact, it's interesting that some of the prophecies use the same language. Jesus talked about that. This is the fourth phenomenon. We had the earthquake that Jesus didn't mention because he only dealt with post-tribulation. But John did mention it because he started with that one whilst the persecutions were still continuing. And so we have an earthquake, we have a darkening of the sun, we have a moon that doesn't give its light, turns into blood red, and now we have the stars falling from heaven, all from the correct order, chronologically at the right time. The book of Revelation fits historically with a perfect chronology. The stars will fall from heaven. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. Revelation 6, he says this, as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind, which was unbeknownst to a reporter who used that very language. It just split to all directions. Very, very incredible sight. And so, here we are. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, when you read that in Matthew 24, 29, 30, so he talks about the darkening of the sun. He talks about the moon not giving its light. Then he talks about the stars fallen from heaven. And then he says the powers of the heavens will be shaken. You know where we live in the period of time? I can point it out to you. We live right there. Do you understand what I'm saying? And we closer to verse 30, the powers of the heaven to be shaken, much closer to verse 30 than we live to verse 29. Why do you think these prophets were inspired to give us this information? Why did Jesus say it? He said it in reply when his coming would be. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Where does he come from when he comes for us? He comes from heaven, isn't that correct? Alone? What is the company that he will have with him when he comes? Angels. All the angels. This is a power field. This is a power field that will approach this planet of the likes that we have never seen or experienced. Hollywood could never make it up, And he says, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Now, I have a question for you. All the tribes, all the nations, all the people of this planet will mourn. Not all of them. Thanks heavens. But why in general will the nations be upset when he comes back? Because he is coming back. No, they're not ready. What have they failed to do? What do you think? Acknowledge him, I like that. What else have they failed to do? How many of them would be there saying, I never knew. I didn't think this would ever happen. They are full of fear, which means there might have been a message. There would have been a warning, wouldn't it? Somewhere in their life, somewhere during the course of this existence, which is about to finish, they had heard the call to come to the truth, to find Jesus. It is not about knowing all the facts. Mind you, it helps. It fortifies your faith. But they have declined, neglected, passed up the opportunity. There's a very sad statement in the Bible in relation to this. The summer has passed and we're not saved. It is then irrevocable. No point joining a church at this time or requesting baptism. It's too late. There's a close of probation, the Bible teaches, just before Jesus returns. This is a solemn warning. It's a very solemn warning. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power, with incredible power and great glory. That scene will be so overwhelming. And what that power field will do as it approaches this planet is incredible. In fact, the Revelator had something to say about it. Like I said, we're living here, right there, closer to the 30, much closer than the 29. Which is datable, 1833. John the Revelator, 95 AD, notes this. He said, then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. How many islands were moved out of its place? All of them. Australia is an island, by the way. Well, it is. Oh, don't think that we're okay here. Don't think the government can help you. No. Then the sky receded as a scroll. We suddenly can see what you've never been able to see because of the phenomenon of that approaching power field. When it's rolled up and every mountain and island was moved out of its place, we are living, as far as Revelation is concerned, between verse 13 and 14. Very interesting. Easy to pinpoint. And so it is a very sobering thought, a sobering message. Look at this. Then let me just go back to the previous verse. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, we would say the politicians, the millionaires and billionaires, all of those who had high positions, were in the upper class and the upper crust of our societies. All of them, with everybody else who has refused the message, says here, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man, no exception, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. Isn't that incredible when they have to do that? Why in the caves of the rocks and the mountains? Well, the dwelling places are no longer there. They have collapsed. We will see a scenery, and I believe we could be very well the generation that will physically see this coming without dying first. And as you see everything, all the structures, all the billions of dollars spent on the high rise, and you see it all collapsing. It's all falling apart. The whole thing. This is what the Bible teaches. They are hiding themselves because they're scared for one thing. They said to the mountains and the rocks, they're now talking to the mountains and the rocks. You start talking to mountains and rocks, you're in a bad way, let me tell you. They are talking, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. That is the wrath of Jesus. Isn't it an amazing statement? There will not be an atheist that's alive when he comes. Question is, will you survive this? This is the question. This is the choice that you really have to make now. Now is the time. The reality is God is in control. Because of course Jesus is God, we know that. He is fully God. Not some God, a God. He is fully God. And it's fully God that comes back to us. And he is definitely coming. And we're very close to it. I hope this makes an impression upon you to connect with him. It's the best connection you'll ever make. May God bless you.